Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Freshagenda. And Steve, we're back after a bit of a break. We've had a bit of a break in GDT events.
We came back to the shock of winter in Melbourne, which most people know is not a shock, really. But
No. But we've had our first GDT for 3 weeks and it's been a positive one.
So we'll talk about that. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about the price of milk in Australia.
Yes, and how it compares to elsewhere. And then, of course, Chart of the Week.
Yeah. So in the run-up to this GDT, we've seen all those charts, all those bars rising. So markets firming everywhere. Probably the most hesitant was skim milk powder in Europe, I think, but everything else is moving firmly. The US is tightening up with the realisation that demand is kicking in a bit more and there's not as much milk. So that was moving up. So not a surprise the GDT did likewise. So across the board, except for the weirdness of cheddar, and the cheddar prices were all over the shop again. That's whole milk powder regular. It's important to point out.
Yes, because there's some foibles in that whole milk powder result, isn't there?
There are, and they show up here.
Yes.
So here's where the major C2 contracts are for the commodities, as shown, and alongside that the index.
Yeah, which doesn't appear to make a lot of sense, does it?
So my take is that because you've had such another final step in the collapse of instant product, WMP instant product, the size or the dollar effect of that collapse pulls the average down on a weighted value basis.
Yes.
So while whole milk powder regular is up strongly, instant's down, bringing everything back to a normal premium after several events of very great disparity. So that's brought that back, and that's why the index looks so odd. And in fact, the index for whole milk powder made no sense. So anyway, but a good event across the board.
Sure.
The thing to realise, though, this is the low point of availability.
It certainly is.
So the month of June has got the lowest in the year, and that's both whole milk and skim milk powder shown there. So that'll continue for obviously the next event in June and the slow increase in July. Skim milk powder picks up a bit more quickly then.
Yes.
But that's...
So that'll test this this recovery or this rally a little bit.
Yeah, I think the one on the left is more important because that's still constraining availability onto this platform.
Sure.
When we know there's subdued demand out of China. But so talking of demand, demand was quite good on those reduced volumes for the powders. And when we see how the event started, it was like one of the highest starts.
Yeah, especially for whole milk powder there.
One of the highest we've seen. But it tails off and they ran out of volume or interest. But the damage was done in the early parts, so a 7% rise for the regular product is quite strong.
Yes.
Butter also very good after 6. This is the first in 6. I think it's gone up. So we saw some fairly large falls to get to this, and it's steadied where it is. So maybe that's put a bit of a floor there for the short term. But given where butter prices are in Europe, that's not unexpected. Here's the story of whole milk demand, which is pretty dramatic. You see, China's North Asian buying was down under 20%. We haven't seen that for a long time.
Yeah.
But look at that Southeast Asian chart and the Middle East also both buying higher than, for some time. So that helped balance it out. So, that's a part of that story of why on reduced volumes we saw the value rise. And then the story of instant. So this is that, falling prices. You can see in this event, you still had $1,000 falls out there in C5, smaller falls in the other contracts, but that one is the biggest. And there's that amazing chart of how the premium has moved over time. So, look, a really positive event overall. I think it's, despite the slowdown in China, again, like we said last time, it'll be interesting to see if this sustains from here.
Yep.
Because values have now lifted a bit.
Yeah.
So it'll continue to test that resolve.
That's right. But interesting that the overall index kind of masks the positivity in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Fascinating.
So, just looking at skim milk powder, I think the other interesting thing is that European product prices really surged at this event, and in fact now stand at a premium over the like-for-like from Fonterra of about $60 a tonne. So that's quite a shift.
Yeah.
And just showing how that movement's occurred in the last couple of events. Small tonnage in Europe, and most of it went to Europe. But nonetheless, that's an interesting comparison again.
Sure.
This time, we'll look at the price of milk.
Yeah, so it's obviously hunting. We call it hunting season in Australia at the moment. The new season will start on the 1st of July, but under the mandatory code that's operating here, manufacturers have to put out their milk supply agreements on the 1st of June on their websites, so that for transparency reasons.
Yep.
And then we have the fun of sorting out what that actually means. What those agreements mean in terms of milk pricing, and then we have the jockeying once everybody sees what everybody else is doing over the ensuing days and weeks, don't we? Which is where we're at.
Which we're at now. And so we've only seen a couple of revisions, but we'll expect a big one. And we've allowed for that in the Fonterra number there. We've allowed quite an uplift, and excuse us if we've got that wrong, but that's due to come out today. And we'd expect, given the weighting of their milk, it'll be a little bit below the others because they've got quite a bit in Gippsland.
Sure.
So that's why
the seasonal issues then weigh it down. Yeah.
So we'd expect Saputo might respond as well. And we hear there have been other announcements. We haven't got our mitts on yet that will bring up some of the fresh buyers into like Lactalis. So until then, watch this space. It'll continue to move up, probably settle around, on average, the way they describe these weighted averages, just around $9, maybe a little below.
Yeah, that's in the neighbourhood, isn't it? And it should, for those who aren't familiar with the Australian dairy landscape, it is quite tight for milk. Production has fallen every month for the last 11 months, despite pretty good conditions and pretty good current season price. So there is a lot of competition for milk, and most farmers in these southern regions, sort of the southeast corner of Australia, would have a lot of options as to where they send their milk, wouldn't they? So it's a very different situation than, say, New Zealand and some other places where there might be one or maybe two.
Yeah, in some regions there are 8 to 10 buyers.
That's right.
After milk, and you're right. I mean, we're down year on year, 5-6% at the moment. No signs that's going to get any better. And in fact, here we are in winter, the harsh winter, and it's as wet as. So the problem is, and with that, we've used that rainfall forecast map before in these videos, but that's expected. We're going to see more rain, and we're going to see sodden conditions. It's going to make it hard to get a spring uplift.
Absolutely. So where does this compare, Steve, with the rest of the world?
So I've had a bit of a stab at rest of year numbers using a tight range on US, expecting that we'll see that go from $25 to $27 per hundredweight. New Zealand is a range on the Fonterra estimate at the moment, putting it 50 cents either side of a midpoint.
Sure.
And Europe, a stab at saying they're going to be 55 to 60 euro cents per kilo of milk. Majors are setting at 55 at the moment, so they probably will push higher. So bringing those all back to US dollars and keeping that range, it shows that Australia's still at the bottom of the pile there. But there's those high domestic market pressures driving Europe and US higher, whereas Australia and New Zealand are more reflective of global prices, particularly Oceania, which are a little lower, particularly for compared to internal prices, we're seeing nothing like those, particularly for butterfat and cheese.
That's right.
So, and Australia and New Zealand are kind of on a par there. Probably, if anything, the New Zealand number, like for like, will be a little lower than Australia. That's probably controversial. We'll get a few calls, but yeah, it's going to end up pretty similar, even though quite different market exposures.
Sure.
I think it'd show, though, that the domestic market isn't adding anything to the Australian return.
No, I mean, it's pretty tough. Obviously, like everywhere else, across the board, inflation, cost of living pressures, retailers pushing back on price increases. So it's a similar story in Australia, but very difficult to get price increases through.
Yeah. All right, Joe, chart of the week.
Well, chart of the week, I thought we'd head across to the US. Some interesting numbers out of the US. Again, a bit of a drop in milk production there. But what's interesting perhaps is what's going on with cheese production. So we've got an overall increase in cheese production, but cheddar falling a bit. So what's that mean, Steve?
So, I think there's probably...
What's your theory?
My theory is that there's maybe a bit of softness in the food service market. And you might remember when you put up that excellent chart a few videos ago of the relationship between gasoline prices, cheese prices and demand or disappearance. And for American cheese, which is mostly cheddar, it moves around where there's sensitivity to the spending of out-of-home consumption. And parts of the cheddar market that go into food service, sit-down food service or eating out. Right, I think that's what we're seeing here, a little bit of softness there or uncertainty in that respect, because no doubt we're starting to see some pullback on spending.
Yeah, but the mozzarella production is still pretty strong there, so still plenty going on. Pizzas for takeaways, perhaps.
Yeah, home delivery.
Or delivery.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, the other interesting thing is non-fat dry milk skim well down. So again, those skim prices are being supported by really tight supplies everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, they are being discouraged. The whey complex is also interesting. I think the last numbers show a little increase in dry whey production, which will keep pressure on that as the higher concentrates start to wane. And I'm getting the wind up here from Joe. Those experienced viewers will know that when Joe starts going, yep, that's it, we're going to wind up. And that's all from us. Thanks for watching. We'll be back soon.